All right. Welcome to another DFW Running Talk. I'm Chris Detzel, and today we have a special guest, Rob Goyen. Rob, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm good, man. So I saw you a couple of weeks ago, and I was really excited. We just started this podcast. I was like, man, I got to talk to Rob, get him on this podcast, and here you are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I for someone who spent a lot of time and years on podcasts, doing them, hosting them, being
Yeah.
on them, it's been a break for me to be on a bunch. It's fun to be back and chat all things trail running for sure.
Yeah. And that's what I want to dive deep into is, you came on the trail running scene, I don't know, like several years ago, and was like, "Who's this Rob guy?" And you started to kill it. Like I think you, in my mind, like I'm not a hardcore trail runner die kind of person. I've been in that community for quite a while, and I remember from my thoughts around trail running was more 50Ks, 100 milers, and things like that. And you changed that a little bit, or at least from my point of view, and I think from others, and then brought in 5Ks, 10Ks, and all that stuff. But before we start talking about that, let's talk a little bit about your background, where you come from, and those kinds of things, and then we'll get into that.
Yeah, I mean, my role of how I got into trail running was like a journey in sobriety. I've
Mm,
been sober now for 12 years, so that would put my last date of drinking 2012. So I was a really big guy at one point, 350, 60 pounds plus, and was drinking and doing all the wrong things in life, you could say. And a lot of just running a lot from childhood trauma and ended up finding running. My wife, my current wife now, I met her, she was working out and I found the enjoyment in running. And I was walking on the treadmill. I can remember walking on the treadmill and seeing this guy that was doing an Ironman. And he was
mm,
talking about how like he had all these problems in life with drugs and alcohol and how he felt like he got the same thing out of running. It's like the dopamine fix. So
yeah.
someone who's that way as ADHD, like it clicked for me and I started walking, started running, then ended up just by chance finding trails. I was running the Memorial Loop in Houston. If you've seen it, right? It's 3 miles. It's boring at times, but
Hmm.
I was running
Done it
it. It
several
was a
times.
rainy day. Yeah. Running in a rainy day. And I saw this little fence off that led me into the fort. And I jumped in there and I thought I was a kid again. I called
Yeah.
Jeremy Hansen, who's local Houston guy, one of my good friends. I called him and I said, man, I don't know what this is, but I found something. And he was like, what did you find? I was like, trails. I don't know what this is. I'm like, I'm out in the woods again. And I think a week later, Jeremy joined me for a 6 hour run.
It.
We were just guys that were running and hiking and walking. And we thought it was the coolest thing ever. And our original group name was the Dirty Bums, which we can't use anymore, but we call that because I used to fall all the time. And we would eat, we were in like cargo pants and eating sandwiches out of the back of the trunk. But
Well,
we had no concept in like 2011, like what like
yeah.
trail running was. And it wasn't a popular sport then either. It's very niche, right? So not long story short is we ended up starting the Houston area trail runners. Jeremy and I, a friend of ours named Jose and my wife. And then subsequently I got sober around that time and running, trail running and being active has always kept me sober, which is great. And
Yeah.
from hosting mock trail races, which is what we were doing in 2012 and 13, we're essentially like going to like chaos races or other people's races, dance
Yeah.
races.
Yeah.
We were making mock loops in Memorial Park, like a 5 mile loop, and we put an aid station. So we were trying to get the Houston people that were racing to say, okay, let's make a mock race. You like once every couple of months. So we would get used to eating and nutrition and how it feels to come in and out of an aid station. And yeah, like Larry Cosin, a good friend of mine as well. He ended up asking me if I wanted to go to Brazos Bend State Park. This is in like 2000 in November. He asked me if I wanted to go and pitch them on a free race. And I think right in the middle of this conversation when Larry's about to start ophthalmology school, and I don't know what happened. And Larry says I blacked out. I think I did. But I blacked out and ended up pitching them on like a 50 miler in the spring and a 100 miler in December. And the park was literally like the guy, his name's David Heineken. He was just, yeah, if you pull the permits, like you can do whatever you want. Of course, I grew up going to Brazos Bend. And then I left that conversation. We get in the parking lot. I'm like geared for my life. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. I can't wait to tell my wife. And we get down the road like 5 minutes and Larry calls me. He goes, man, I don't know what you just did, but I can help with that. He was all right. Ophthalmology school. I thought we were talking about a free race. You're talking about 600 people at a real race. Like, Rob, I didn't sign up for that.
Yeah.
And I got that.
I blacked out. I want to go back. You blacked out. Like you're pitching this guy
Yeah.
about it and you just can't remember it hardly. But yes,
Yeah.
you did it.
I got overcome with enthusiasm of
Got it.
like
Good.
that.
So excited.
I really want to do something. And I always had all these ideas from my time volunteering in races and my time like seeing people do races. And so I had all these ideas that I just hadn't unleashed on somebody. So I think I blacked out and went for it. I swung for the fences. And that is the story of trail racing over Texas. We started trail racing over Texas, won 2014. And Brazos Bend, we put on 2 races that year. One was a multiple distance 5K or probably 10K, 25K, 50K, 50 miler. And then that December was Brazos Bend 100 #1, which at the time was probably a half full 50 miler and 100 miler.
So let's dive into that because I'm really interested in kind of the business aspect of it. One, and then two is I kind of look forward and looking at what you've done and to really help. I feel like you've helped some race directors and they've changed their philosophy and things like that. But as you started putting this together, when did you think, okay, hey, this is a business now? And maybe we go through that journey. Maybe you say, okay, I got this one race up and did these things. But then I was like, how do I make some money? Like, we don't do this we love the sport, but you've got to make a little bit of money and you've got to invest into the sport and things like that. Can you walk through some of that and just some aha moments and things?
Yeah, I'll be super frank. I never didn't treat it like a business. The first race we ever put on, I treated it that way. My mom was a CPA. So growing up, my mom had a rule that you didn't go to bed if your books weren't done. I still stand by that rule every day. I'm a guy who works during the day, takes a break in the afternoon, and then I work from 9 to 12 every night. I have every night of my life. I look forward to it, the quiet time, which if you were a runner,
I go to bed at 9. So, it would be rough.
I'm a 9 to 12 guy. I answer all the emails at 9 to 12. That way no one can respond back. It's a tactic I like to use.
Yeah.
But it's also a chance for me to catch up on my books. My parents were both entrepreneurs. I owned a tax business at the same time that I started TROT. So I had another business that I was running as well.
Yeah.
But I never didn't treat it like a business. And I've been very open with that from the get-go. And I've tried to express, even now when we have conversations with race directors, is that if you run it like a business, you can produce a better product. To me, if your mortgage depends on how you treat the people at your races, you treat the people a lot better. That's my own philosophy. And I also think in our sport, and this is the important part. I'm not saying you have to get rich off trail running. I'm not saying you have to make some crazy living, but I will tell you this. It's really impossible to put on trail races if you're bitter. If you're bitter at the job you're doing, especially in a service industry job.
Yeah.
Everyone, and you have to get used to the fact that, and it takes time, but you have to get used to the fact that your hardest day working as a race director is everyone else's vacation.
Yeah, that's right. Interesting.
Everyone is there to have the best day they can have, and it will be the worst day that you have.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Work-wise, yes, there's enjoyment. So my philosophy was always, how do I do the things up front? And that would be staffing-wise, that would be monetary-wise, whatever, the business side of it. How do I do everything correctly leading up to that race?
Yeah.
So that my interactions with people at that race day, whereas like that I could present to them the best version that I could. And that is where obviously a lot of people know when I race direct, it's hugs and high fives, right? I love to give hugs and high fives. There's a lot of reasons.
Even though I'm a sweaty people, it
doesn't make a difference. I've had it all down my back. I've had the sweat. I've had it all. Yeah. It's why people used to go, why do you wear a hoodie? I was like, it's protection. I'm protecting my body from your
take it off later. Get another one on.
It's a layer. I've had it all run down my hoodie and I can get another hoodie. And I don't want that down my back. It was designed that way by me because I would tell people, the people that cross the line are the people that are paying you the money.
Yeah.
And if you're a race director out there, you can do the way you want to do it. If you're not standing at your finish line, you're not hugging people and giving out handshakes, then the last thing they remember from when they leave your race. Is maybe a volunteer doing it, which I understand at times. But at the end of the day, I looked at it like, this is my community. These are my people. You
Yeah.
paid me. You didn't pay anybody else. When you paid that money, went right, minus some fees, went right to my checking account.
Yeah.
So you deserve to get the best of me. And I've prepped all of these things to give you the best of me. So it's just super, for me, it's super important. And like I said, my parents were entrepreneurs. My mom ran a daycare. My dad ran a telecommunications company. And I watched how so I was grown up in a service house. So I
Yeah.
watched the way they treated their customers. I watched the way that at times my parents were treated unfairly by those that they worked for. I saw that the way that looked and felt, and ultimately, like, I'm raised in a service position, and my job is to service people. And I've always said that, like,
Yeah.
the person I race directs, if you want to be successful at it, at the end of the day, you have to have a servant heart. You are a servant
No
of
doubt.
that day.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, so we'll get back into this because I think because I've got lots of questions about how hard all you're doing. Well, what I'm getting to now, you're doing a lot of things, right? You're looking at swag. You probably had a business around creating swag. You sell it, then you have to have a warehouse to put it all in. And then you also I mean, you're traveling all over Texas, basically. And so I'm sure you have this big trailer, then you have a warehouse, and then you have the swag stuff, and then you have a lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then you're trying to market it, and then you're trying to, and then you got to actually put on the race, and then you got to take down the race. And
Yeah.
geez, like, it's a lot of stuff, that you have to do. And so I do think there has to be some love for the sport because, I mean, you just mentioned you loved it because of what it's done to you and helped you get over some things that you're going through in your life. But talk about all of that, all the things that you have to do. And even if you do make money, geez, it's a lot of work and effort.
Yeah, I think the interesting part for me is that, and I'm not going to say this is in equal parts, but I equally love, thank you. My first love in life is business.
Yeah.
My wife asked me out on the date. That's a true story, right? She would obviously, you would never would have asked me out. You were too busy crunching numbers.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that's the way my mind works. Like, last thing I do before I go to bed is crunch numbers. I wake up and crunch numbers. And,
Yeah.
and it's just the strategy of business. I just love it. It's my first love in life. So to me, I look at it like, I loved having a trail racing company, not only because of the experience that runners got, but I like the puzzle pieces of how to run a company. Like, I never hired people to do swag for me. I manufactured my own swag. I signed a contract with a screen printer. I've imported stuff overseas for 2 decades now. So yeah, some of that is skill, right? We started with 2 races. It was my wife and I, right? I mean, that's all the people that were there. And I always tell people, scale when it busts at your seams. Never scale assuming your company's going to grow and you're hiring in the hope that you can grow, right? Work hard enough so it busts at the seams. When it busts at the seams, you hire somebody, because as a business owner, especially, and I'm a small business owner, right? Like, when I had the tax company, we had 40 employees, but truth is, like, I'm a less than 10 guy, right? And a lot of that's because I love the work. But the reason I say that is because you want to run as lean as you can for as long as you can so that you can scale properly. So it was Rachel and I for the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. So we started with 2 races, and then the next year we went to 7, and the next year we went to 11, and then 17. Our warehouses looked the same, right? The first warehouse we had was our upstairs in our house. The second warehouse was the upstairs in our garage. The third warehouse was a 10 by 10. The fourth warehouse was a 10 by 30. And we could get everything in there, but it was an outside storage unit. So we were having to, like, pee in buckets in the corners if we were in there working, or Rachel had to go behind the trailers that were there and be like, and then around some point past that, and I still remember it, we decided to get a warehouse. Like, and it's right. I'm on the same warehouse block as we were right now. I have another warehouse, but this one was like 2,600 square feet. I had an office and a restroom and a huge thing. And I remember, like, visibly with Rachel, like, emotionally shaking at the thought of adding, like, a $1,700 a month, which at the time was more than our mortgage.
Yeah.
but we were putting on all these events. Like we had gotten HOA calls about washing shit in the front yard. Like the big 26-foot U-Haul truck didn't even fit in our driveway when we were trying to load stuff. So half of the nose would be out there. Trash people couldn't get by it. Like we were busting at the seams. Like we couldn't do any more from our home. And we got a warehouse. And then when we got a warehouse, like my focus on races was always how do we get them out into the public? Photographers, along the way, we hired Helica, team wanted this social media. So she handled all my social media accounts, my newsletters. Of course, people always used to say I have the worst grammar in the world. What can do? So she fixed that.
I adjust to that.
I mean,
I've seen it. Was he asleep or something when he just,
I type like I speak, and then
Yeah.
I don't ever go backwards.
Yeah.
So once I've written it, I'm like, it's good. It's not good. I'm also,
who cares?
yeah, like my running.
It's just Rob. I think, people are like, oh, that's just Rob being Rob, I guess. I don't know, but
Yeah, it's just, my brain would work like this is done and I would just be moving on. And we just added pieces. Took my wife and I, a well-documented 5 or 6 years to have a baby. So when we were really close to having that happen, we hired Amanda and we added these pieces on to scale it up. And you're right. At one point in this equation, we were doing 17 races a year, and 2 for Red Bull, or 1 for Red Bull and 2 helping. But it was every other weekend from August 1st through the end of May for years on end.
yeah.
Yeah. And it is the quintessential start your week, very, very regimented, pack your truck, get to the venue, mark your course, put the race on, home the same night, wash your stuff, go pick up shirts. I would be ordering shirts as I'm driving to the next race. Like and as much as it sounds chaotic, like in all the years we did it, we only had a couple of like shipping issues where metal didn't get here or whatever. But the truth is that the cadence and the rhythm was because like we had a great team, world class, and everyone was selfless. But at the end of the day, we all had jobs and roles that we did, and everyone did those jobs and roles well. And that's, one of the biggest reasons why the community flourished as well. And I would tell people all the time, I like when we were smaller, this sounds crazy. When we were smaller, I felt like we put on better events. That may not be true, but it's just a feeling.
Yeah.
I feel like when we had 4 or 5 events, we put on better events because obviously like we have 4 or 5, like for instance, like I think the best races in the country for the most part, this obviously like says nothing to do with my job, looks kind of, but I think the best races in the country are a lot of times races where it's their only race for the year.
Yeah.
Right? In like a Western or a Broken Arrow or a Rut, or some of those races where it's the only race they put on because they can put everything into one event, right? They make that thing feel like it's like UTMB, right? UTMB is
kind of like a big marathon road race, put everything in that.
Yeah, Houston Marathon is once a year. If you had 13 Houston marathons, it wouldn't feel that special.
No,
it feels special because it's one.
Yeah.
But I would tell people my job has changed at 17 to actually not put on like the grandest race that there is.
Yeah.
My job is to produce the most consistent experience that you get every time you show up. And I don't also treat our events as races. I try to treat them as events. So I want to make a memorable experience in your life on that day. I don't want you to just say, oh, I went to another one of Rob's races and it was okay. I never wanted that. I wanted you to walk away and feel like it meant something to you because I'm a product of the change of trail running, and trail running changes people's lives, both physically and then also all the people that I've met that have been married because of our races or have kids because of our races. Like it's a connection point of the community that means a lot to a lot of people. So my job at the end of that was just to be the absolute most consistent. And I think we did that really well. And I think that's obviously why we grew the way we did. And for me as a person who's an inquisitive person, I didn't come into the sport and I came into the sport a little brash. I will admit. I came in and basically said, hey, listen, I'm here to take over the state of Texas. I'm coming in.
Sounds like this guy I just talked to that he said the same thing. This is really young.
Yeah.
So.
And that's what I said. I said, I'm coming in to take over the state. Now, back in those days, like Joe was the race director with Tejas, and We had some issues along the way there, which is fine. But at the end of the day, like I didn't really mean it like I was going to, and there's a great business quote that says like, you can become the biggest building in town by either building the biggest building in town or by tearing every other building around you. And I didn't care about trying to tear other people's races down or say negative things. I just had the confidence that I could build the biggest building in town.
Yeah.
And my way of doing it is pushing the envelope, which is like pushing what people saw at races, sign-up-a-thons, discounts for volunteers. Like, all that stuff never existed before us. People didn't do 50% per race. No one did that. We did that from day one.
Some of the tactics that you implemented were like just a Facebook kind of live group, for example. That's when that was really popular. I don't know how popular that is anymore. Nobody was doing that. So if somebody came in live to your Facebook group, they would have the opportunity to win 50% off or some swag, or I don't know. You had all kinds of different things, but it gave you a platform, one, to bring people in live, them have, in a sense, live access to you, which I always love. I have live expert, or I have access to the director of this big trail running race director guy, and he's giving away free stuff, and not just that, people loved you for that. And you were I don't know anybody at first doing any of that. And I don't see it anymore. Saw some trying to do some stuff. I have to say, but you have that personality for it too, right? Like you're just hey, I'm going to try this thing and it's working. And then you continue to do it because it worked. My wife was like, hey, we've got to be on TROT's Facebook Live so we can try to get 50% off these races and races to come. And I was like, all right.
Yeah. And some of that goes just because I own another company, right? So I own a streetwear company. So I am largely dialed into what's happening at the young level. Like even right now, like I have a streetwear company still. We do auction stuff on Whatnot, which 99% of people that are probably 40 or older have no idea what Whatnot is, but it's super popular with young people, TikTok, Chop, all those things. But it's where the attention is. So for me at the time, it was like, I do love chatting with people and I love the interactions of one-on-one. So for me, it was always, how do we push this pace? And that was TROT Live, sign-up-a-thons, which is what everybody loved, which are super fun. And there's a lot of reasons there and why to do them. There's a lot of risks there, right? Because you're losing the gain, right? You're giving discounts to gain and you have to think about why you're doing that. But yeah, that will never change. And I said this the other day. I said, obviously I've been out of the sport as far as full-time race directing for a couple of years. And a lot of people I talk to or a lot of people that I help still don't see them doing what I'm doing 2 years ago. And I have thoughts right now of 4 or 5 things that I don't see anyone doing, which I don't understand why they're not doing. But that's just because I don't.
Can you share those things, or is that?
I'd rather not. Rather use those at another time. No, but like for instance, when I finished putting races 3 years ago, right? If you couldn't get like proper cell phone signal, like you had some problems, right? There's some limitations when you can't get signal, but there's not an excuse not to have signal right now. You can get Starlink. Like it doesn't cost that much money. Actually, it costs us more to have a Wi-Fi from AT&T at the time than it does now. So if you can have internet where you're at, wherever you want to, yes, the upfront cost is $500 or $600, but it's $50 or $150 a month. You have to put that in your, in your budget, but that means you should have live results all the time. That means that you should have social media shooting
100%. I love that. Like, hello, I go to a race. I'm like, I can't even get my fucking thing on, whatever.
And to be frank with you, these are the things that keep me up at night, right?
Yeah.
You should have live, video, or you should have live results 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Your photographer should be locked in, or videographer should be locked in doing social all the time of your race because they have a spot to do it. You should have another one probably up. If you don't have a place with really good service, you should have another one dedicated just for your runners. So your runners can access it and share their experiences while the race is going on, because all it does is make you look better. Number 3 is you should be live streaming. You should have another one or the same one connected so that you're live streaming on a multitude of platforms, depending on where your social strategy is.
Yeah.
Which, if you want to do Twitch, if you want to do YouTube, but there's really not like, those alone, those 3 things are just components that I could do 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I can't
Technology
do it
wasn't
now.
100% there.
Yeah, it wasn't there, but it is here now.
Yeah.
And like those things aren't used. And I think the other thing that I still see not used correctly is social media. Social
Technology.
media is grossly underused and undervalued. And I don't think people really understand that if you build your following enough on your social platforms like a Facebook and Instagram, and I'm not talking about buying followers. I'm talking about
Yeah.
an organic
Yeah.
build.
Yeah.
When you go to advertise against that build, it is
Yeah.
insanely cheap. And
Yeah.
people used to always come to me like, man, I see your Facebook events all over. We had friends of ours, even our parents, right? They would
Yeah.
screenshot, be like, Rob, another race in my face all the time. And then they would be like, your advertising budget is out of control. Let me tell y'all something. I didn't spend more than $100 a race in advertising.
Yeah. How much?
$100.
A month?
No, in total.
Really?
Yeah. I would, and I'll tell you the juice, right? I would, our Facebook group at the time, our Facebook page had 28,000, whatever, however many people, but you create an event, and the event still to this day, Facebook event, you essentially would put it up and I would run $100 from the day that I opened it till the day that it closed.
Yeah.
And that's going to push the event in people's feeds
Yeah.
all the time. So you see it all the time. I didn't have to promote posts that often because when you have real 20,000 people, it's engaging. And then with having an ambassador group like we did,
Yeah.
part of the contest of the ambassador groups was, hey, the next 3 months we're having a contest and you get 1 point for every person you invite to the event. So if you have 30 ambassadors and they all invite 3,000 people or 300 people to the event, you got 9,000 people being invited, plus your own organic reach as well.
Yeah.
So what you end up seeing is 9 to 10,000 people being invited to an event. And on top of that, for the next 100 days, somebody's event page is getting blipped. And once they've accepted into the event, they don't get the advertising. So your advertising actually gets better over time.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with you. Like if you're not using social, then you're missing out. I do think that I use social quite a bit on whether it's work or LinkedIn is a big one for us. It's not that easy, right? Like when I think about the job that you had, as a race director, but owner, CEO, and all these things, all the things that we just mentioned, whether it was getting a warehouse or getting swag, getting a truck to move all that stuff and then you have to worry about the marketing piece, and social is really part of that marketing. Social marketing has got to be part of that. I don't disagree, but a lot of these people don't know how to use social in the right way, right? That's the key is like, I can't really, you get on Instagram or you get on TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or X, whatever it's called, YouTube. There's a lot of social networks to use, and you got to understand what you might not be able to do everything. You got to figure out what is important. And I agree. You have to have some kind of social type strategy because what you did was not the norm, especially in Texas. I don't know what's gone outside of Texas, but I don't know, man. I think that you're right, but I also think it's hard. I don't think it's easy.
100%. But I'd also say that there's two options if it's hard. You either learn or you pay someone.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Listen, 6 years ago when I started my streetwear company, my son was like, you got to get into Discord. I'm like, I don't know what Discord is.
Yeah.
He's like, what do you mean, Dad? I'm like, what is Discord? He was like, what did you use back in the day? And I'm like, for what? He's
Shitty forums.
People. And I said, ICQ. And he goes, okay, so think of Discord as modern day ICQ.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And he goes, and you log in. And then, so my son walked me into Discord. And then once I got into Discord, I gained access into groups and started asking questions. And I said, hey, listen, I'm a 40-year-old guy getting into streetwear.
Yeah.
And I know that most of these kids are 16, 15, 17, 18. But listen, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's not uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, you either go in and do those things or you need to pay people to do those things. Like social media is not going to stop. It only gets younger every day. And the attention span of wherever you're going in life is only going to change. And you can be proficient at Facebook, and 3 years from now, you will need to be proficient with the next app that comes along to keep your events, races, business, and in the eye of your consumer. And you can't just to me, I'm not, you can't just say, this is hard or I don't know how to do it if you're expecting yourself to like grow and have a big
Yeah.
business or events. You can't say you don't want to do it and then you could just go hire someone to do it for you. But I was never that person. I'm always the
Yep.
person that like, I need to know it first and understand it and learn it because my business mind is to find the angle. I have to find the angle
Yeah.
first. And I could teach someone how to automate the angle, but I need to find that angle. And
Mm.
that's the way that I'm built. But I think that there's so much I still see. And listen, there's so much I don't know. Every time I'm in a chat with our like tech team at Ultra Sign Up or like our statistician, like we have a guy that works for us named Matt Abbott, that kind
Yeah.
of blows my mind.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Yeah.
I'm like, y'all went to school for this? Like,
Yeah.
I'm not college educated. All my smarts is just street smarts.
Yeah.
These people are really smart people. There's a lot of like really smart people that do like data and like they watch over that stuff. And it's cool because when they apply their data's knowledge to trail running and like stats, it's super cool. But it's just, I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I think data, I have to get into that big time, but I think when you have people like them that went to school, data is important. Even at my job today is I've got to prove that I build online B2B communities from ground up at these companies, right? And I've got to show the ROI of why people talking to each other and helping each other and running these events, whether they're live webinars or going to, you got to provide the data. And if the data says, hey, here's the ROI and this is what you're looking, same thing with trail running, I assume is the more that you can not just get into the data, but prove ROI from that data to say, okay, we have this many trail runners at each race, or, I'm sure there's other data points that you're looking at. We have, this many people coming from Facebook ads. Yes, it's working. Or last year it was doing this year's doing that. I think it's an important part. How did you look at data then? Was that just, we're getting signed up, so that's positive, we're making more money? What was the kind of a high level thing there?
Like I always looked at it like, cost of acquisition of runners was big for me, like to be there, like what it really costs. I was big on ambassador groups. I still would be for various reasons if they're used the right way. I was big on, we formed an elite team that I funded and I had really big projects every year that I set money aside. Like we made a movie, we had elite teams and we had the TROT Cup Awards where we gave away jackets and all those things. And you have to prepare for all those. But I think a lot of my data is each race. The company was the company, but each race was a business.
Yeah.
And that's really how I looked at it. And it was each race has its own P&L sheet. And I'm a Google Sheets user. I know that that's old school, but I'm a Google Sheets. Every race has a P&L sheet. And the same races have about the same nine fees to them. And you put those 9 fees down. You know what those fees are going to be. I can estimate per runner how much it costs to be there. And then in that regard, yes, you have some standardized overhead fees like your warehouse, your electricity, if you have salaried employees. But I just looked at it as every race was its own business. And if you didn't make it as a business, you didn't get to stay.
Yeah. And so eventually you just said, what would you do? Run it a few times and then be like, okay, it's not working, and then just scratch it? Or how'd you go approach a race that just didn't make money?
I never had one.
Oh, really?
The first race we put on, just to give y'all an idea that don't know, but the first race we ever put on was 600 people. Yeah. And I knew what the cost was as good as them. Obviously you get better at it, right?
Yeah,
I signed a contract with a huge printing company, which got my printing lower. I opened up wholesale accounts for t-shirts instead of waiting for someone to contact me and offer them for me for $10.
Yeah.
I opened wholesale accounts across the country to keep that cost down. Same thing with medals. When we came to awards, I didn't like buying just random awards. I like to support people buying soaps from them or, dominant cookies for us. Like if I'm going to spend money on awards, I'd rather spend money with somebody who's in the community where I can put money back in their pocket. So yeah, I never lost money on races, and it just became it's just a cadence of that. And the truth is, a lot of people in the industry, when I came around, I would get the old, Rob only wants to put on big races. And like, I like the small hometown feel. And I would tell people, My job is to put really big races on that feel like really small races.
Yeah.
And if I can balance a huge race that at the finish line, you still feel well supported, the community loves you, I can give you a hug, and
Yeah.
your experience felt great, then I've won. But what people like in business may not understand is, 70% of the cost doesn't, not necessarily that true, 50% of the cost doesn't change no matter how many people show up.
Yeah.
So all of these permits and all of the rentals and all of
Same.
the truck and the tents and all that kind of stuff, y'all, was going to be the same no matter what. So my goal was to try to maximize the races that we had. Yes, we
Yeah.
grew to 17, but I think that the other part to that is, at one point in 2018 or 19, 15 of those 17 races sold out.
Wow.
So we're not talking, I'm not talking about having races for 100 people because it looked cool. I'm talking about trying to literally fill up each piece of inventory in those 17 races or those 15 races. And there's no need to add races if they're not going to do well. To me, it waters down the experience a little bit to be super wide and have events that are, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have events that are super small, but like we have, like Lone Star for us was a really small event. Like the 200 was really small. The 100 was really small at times. And yes, we didn't make a lot of money, breaking even, making $100 here and there, but those races, they had reasons that we do.
Yeah.
But then when the reasons were over, like I was trying to get Lone Star into Hard Rock, which is why we did Lone Star 100. And after I proved that it was a great race and Carl said it was one of his favorite races and it didn't get accepted, I pulled the plug on the race.
Yeah.
Because it took too many volunteers to put it on. It wasn't a reward for the community to have everyone from El Paso bust their ass so 42 people could run around the mountain. It's not fair to the community to do that.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose, you're going to lose your volunteer base if you misuse them.
Yeah.
And you can only put on as many great races as you have great volunteers.
Yeah.
This sport will never
100%.
be about runners. It will be about volunteers. Because if you don't have enough great volunteers, then your runners have a worse experience and you essentially get bottlenecked at the experience that you can provide.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why when we started TROT, my job was the front end, but my wife's full-time job at TROT was to manage volunteers because I knew that the volunteer side was more important than the runners you could find all the time.
Yeah.
People are coming out, taking off on this Saturday that they could be with their kids, their husband, they could be at the movies, they could be doing anything in the world. But they choose to come out and stand behind an aid station table, watch
8 hours,
puke and rub gel everywhere. And they stand out there and they do it because it's a labor of love. And yes, some do it for the race credits. But man, those people are your lifeline to put on events. And if you can't figure out a way to treat them, then you're going to have a massive problem.
I remember my wife, so she has volunteered for a lot of these races, in the past. And one thing that I know that she appreciated about the races that you put on was, hey, you got some race credits. Hey, you were rewarded. She wanted to go out and help. But I remember, some of the races that she did go in and help, some of these directors were like, thanks for helping, or not even say thanks for helping. And sometimes would overuse some of the volunteers. And so I think that's said and something that everyone can learn from because putting on a volunteer program is I can imagine how difficult that is to build up. I could certainly understand the races that you put on, in the past and the love that you gave to your volunteers was certainly appreciated. I think you have to, if you don't, you just won't be able to last for all that long or have a great race experience for the racers, right?
Yeah. And it wasn't that way. Don't get me wrong. Like first race, it's that Houston area trail runner. Like every friend that we could get, my wife's friends were volunteering. My mother-in-law and father-in-law are there. Like the Brazos Bend 100, my mother-in-law smashed the cargo van she was in into the other cargo van that we rented. You know what I mean? You're right. I'm just saying it isn't sunshine and rainbows all the time. But the reason I say that is because, yes, he lost start from somewhere, but I would always try to encourage people too, and this is why we had a bigger volunteer corps is I would tell people, you can be part of the trail community without running the races.
Yeah.
You can just
Yeah.
come and be near it and volunteer to do time or sit in an aid station and bring your daughter or like we were a little restrictive on ages because that it gets a little dicey at time for us. But
Yes.
the point of it was you don't have to be out there running. And our thought, which it works, is if you're apprehensive about running trails, if you think this is really about running, if you think there's all marathon runners that are super fit and thin and all that, like, how do we get you to come out one time and
Yeah.
just to feel the love? And once you feel the love, you won't leave. And that's what
Yeah.
happens. You get people there that don't consider themselves a runner because of what society thinks is a runner or what they may have heard or whatever. And then they volunteer one time and they see someone that looks just like them
Yeah.
go do a 50K or a 10K and they go,
I
you know
know.
what? I can do a 10K too.
Yeah.
And then they do use their race credits. And then once they use the race credits, the difference is they worked, they earned it, and then they finished. And that look in their faces when people and that is the greatest feeling for a race director for me was
Yeah.
when people would finish races that they trained for, they sacrificed for, they didn't think they could do it. And it's a mind blower for them. It's hard to explain, but it's like when people see sunsets or the northern lights, it's the stare in their eye, like, holy shit, like I'm mind blown. And those experiences are what I mean by memorable experiences. That's the goal of someone who puts on events is to make a lasting impression with somebody.
I've got a few more questions because you're so passionate about this. And it's like, I still hear the passion in your voice and just the things that you've done are pretty amazing. So you sold TROT, right? Or what went on with that? What kind of made you to change? Hey, look, I don't know if it's, I don't want to do this again, but it's more of, hey, I'm selling this. Because that
Yes,
was talk to me.
yeah, it was a few things. And I'll first and foremost say that I'm very grateful for the people that chose to take on races.
Yeah.
They didn't have to. I could have just squadushed it and walked away, but that wasn't the plan. But there was a couple of things that happened. Number one, we lost the runner at Brazos Bend, and it was hard. Like emotionally for me, it was hard to get over. And I had a lot of we were putting on so many races that I like didn't have a chance to process it. And instead of having an opportunity to process it because we were putting on races, it just kept coming back up for me. And it was just like the anxiety of it. It was just like nightmares. It was just a lot, right? It was just a lot that was happening. And I was battling through it and trying to work. And then we got hit by COVID like everybody else. And
Yeah.
truth is, we would have shut down TROT in COVID had it not been for me owning another business. My other business did well in that time. So we were able to float it. And then right around that time when we came back, I had spent March through October home for 6 months, being the first time I'd been home.
Yeah.
And I got to watch our daughter grow up.
Yeah.
And at the time, our daughter was 2. And I had been on the road every other weekend. Like my wife had Ruby, and I think 2 weeks later, I'm in the Franklins. And so I wasn't home. And I got used to being home with my
You loved
daughter and watching her grow up. And I did
You're
get to
even
watch.
spending time with the wife, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
That was probably good too.
you know, I didn't get to see my son grow up.
Yeah.
And it really started to lean on me that like, she's only going to be young for about another 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. That's right.
And if I can't find a way to unravel this right now, then I'm going to miss this time for a child that we fought really hard for years. My wife went through multiple miscarriages for, and we went through IVF for, and we fought extremely hard to have a baby.
Yeah.
And then I'm just now going to decide to go back on the road just because I want to go back on the road.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to. I just didn't want to miss it. And I knew that it wasn't going to be hard. It would be really hard to unravel it.
Yeah.
When we're talking about like 15 races. But I just started to speak it out loud. My other company was doing well enough so that I could leave if I wanted to. And ultimately, sometime around that time period, and I jumped the gun and I said a few things online that I shouldn't have said, which were just I just jumped the gun with, and I had a lot of mixed emotions. And I think I said that a couple of times, like, I'm sorry that like I'm saying things out of order and I'm sorry that I'm leaking things, but it was just like bubbling out of me. I was having like severe problems at races. Like
Yeah.
Chris and Ian were so graceful in coming to help me, but I wouldn't have put on most of the final events if it wasn't like for Chris. Like I
Yep.
wasn't
I remember them
sleeping at night
doing that.
before races. Like I was up all night having panic attacks. Like it was
Mm.
just really bad. And it was just this feeling of like, I just want to be home. And if I keep, every time I would leave, it would just happen.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was just me. I didn't have time to process, what had happened to Ted. And so, yeah. So at the end of the day, John LaCroix took Franklin's because he's a Colorado guy. I gave the 4 races up in the North Texas area to Chris and Anna Blaze.
Yeah.
And then around that time, I voiced that I thought about selling TROT. Truth be told, us Ironman tried to buy one of my races a
Yeah.
couple of times, which I never did. And then, yeah, Cal and I were friends, and he heard me say it a couple of times, and he was like, "Hey, I think I might want to get out of the oil field and do something running related." Obviously, he's a
Fun.
runner and a coach,
Yeah.
and
It's great.
and I was like, "Hey, let's work an arrangement out where you just take it over. You
Yeah.
you take the warehouse and you take the liability and responsibility, and I get a way out to do it." And then I've said this publicly before, but the one thing I didn't want to have do is I didn't want to have a situation where, like when Dave left, and I've said
Yeah.
this before, I have the absolute utmost respect for Dave Hannenberg and what to me what he did for this community when I was a new trail runner. And to me, he's one of the best race directors to ever do it. But he left very quickly. And when he
He
left,
did.
his races were in this odd situation where no one knew anything. And then at one point there was a feeding frenzy. And Chris and I laughed about it because running the rows and possums, he was going to take. And I think like I was a week early to him on putting permits in and getting things in, and he respectfully didn't put them on. But it's one of the reasons why I gave Chris those races is because those are really races that deserve to be in somebody's hands that has
Yeah.
that community
Love that race.
pulse. They're great, but at the end of the day, I didn't want that. I didn't want a
Yeah.
feeding frenzy. I didn't want that to happen. So my goal was, how do I get these races to the best people that I can? And then as much as I know people wrote me and I've written it before that I'm appreciative, but I needed time away
Yeah.
from the sport. And which is interesting because I thought that time would be super long. And then maybe 2 months after Cal took over the last possums, I was in Tahoe for a family. Our friends live off this island. I can't remember the island, but they flew into Tahoe to see us in the summer. And we went, and I didn't even know that it was Broken Arrow week or West. I hadn't paid attention to the calendar. And David and Jay, who owned Ultra Sign Up, were eating tap.
Oh, wow.
And they had always asked for me to take meetings, and I always told them I was too busy and I didn't want to chat
Really?
about it. Yeah, it's just me. Like middle of the race season, they're like, "Can we jump on a hour call to talk about this?" I'm like, "I don't have time to talk to y'all. I'm busy."
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Good call.
I don't have time. But yeah, so I happened to be there, and they were like, "Hey, can we have coffee?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll come into the village and I'll have coffee." And a 30-minute conversation was a 3-hour conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, they told me about some of these big ideas they had for Ultra Sign Up and me obviously using the platform for a decade, and Mark Gilligan, who built Ultra Sign Up, built some features for me. And yeah, they just said, "Hey, it's a work from home job." And my role has changed a little bit, but at the end of the day, it was like, I was really scared that I would lose the knowledge base that I had.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be part of the sport. And I've always tried to do stuff at the top level, like when I was director of style running races and stuff like that. So I love the business side of our sport and I love the experience. So it was just a really great opportunity for me to be able to stay in the sport, for me to be behind closed doors, for me to really experience the last 2.5 years here at home. Like even this morning, I got to take my daughter to school, which is super special for me and for her. And yeah, they really gave me an opportunity when I didn't think I needed one, but I definitely did, because I would have hated to not be in the sport for the last 2 years and not see it grow. And it's been fun.
Rob, unfortunately, like this hour is gone already,
Yes.
but the conversation has been amazing, and what you've done with the trail racing community and what it sounds like it's done for your life is pretty great story. And I really appreciate you coming on to DFW Running Talk. Thanks everyone for tuning in to another DFW Running Talk. Please rate and review us, and I'll make sure that Rob rates and review us. But until next time, thank you everyone. Thanks, Rob.
Thank y'all.